oil and gas contracts months ago, Senegal's Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko announced on Monday the setting up of a commission to re-evaluate our contracts in the oil and gas sectors. Speaking on national television, the Premier stated that our deals would be reviewed to ensure they benefit the West African nation. This decision emerges after Senegal recently became an oil producer for the first time. Let's note that initial deals like the Sangoma oil deal with an Australian company showed to be exploitative to the Senegalese, with the country having only 18% share. Could these be a new era for the West African nation, and is this a route towards ensuring economic growth and development? Join us as we unpack this in the course of this program. Meanwhile, we shall equally pick an interest in Nigeria with the escalating fuel crisis, where the West African nation over the years has been grappling with an economic impasse and a cost of living crisis triggered by protests. And of course, we recall that earlier this month, August, from the 1st to the 10th of this month, we saw Nigerians that protested against a bad governance in the West African nation. It's worth noting that on the sidelines of the protest, the former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, suggested that the Nigerian government should have implemented specific measures to cushion the economic impact before removing the subsidy. Ladies and gentlemen, that will constitute today's package of this day on Talking Points of our PAN-African channel. Stay with us. Well, thank you, Mansley, for saving the rendezvous over your Pan-African channel for you, Media Africa. It's always a pleasure to be in your company, and this day over your Pan-African channel, we focus first as our opening topic in the West African nation of Senegal to talk about the recent decision by the Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko to set up a commission that was going to re-evaluate the oil and gas contracts over the years in the West African nation, noting that this was exploitative for the Senegalese people. And of course, to evoke this first topic of this day, we have, first of all, we have OPEOLUWA TAIWO, who is the Executive Director at the Africa Bridge Initiative, joining us all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Mansley, sir, for accepting our invitation.
Awesome. Good to be here today. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. We are equally being joined by SHITTU, FOWORA, who is the digital news editor. He's equally joining us all the way from Nigeria. Thank you, Mansley, SHITTU, for honoring the rendezvous.
Thank you for having me.
Away from the African continent, we have been joined by Dr. STANLEY FONGOD, who is a Pan-Africanist and doubles as an economist. Thank you, Dr. FONGOD, for taking our time to be with us on today's edition of the program. Do we have Dr.
Thank
FONGOD?
you, Sharon, for inviting me.
Thank you immensely, gentlemen, for joining the conversation this day. So to debut today's conversation, ladies and gentlemen, like we mentioned in our preamble, we focus first of all in Senegal. So I'll debut with you, Mr. SHITTU. Now, as a digital news editor, given you've been following not just what's happening in Senegal, but what's plaguing the West African sub-region, what's your appraisal of this recent decision to set up a commission in a bid to revisit some of the deals in the oil and gas sectors of the West African nation?
So certainly it's a good news to hear that there is a setting up of a commission to look into or to review oil and gas contracts in Senegal. Senegal has just discovered oil lately, and considering the geopolitics of energy in the region, it is only fair that all contracts are properly situated so that there will be no clauses and provisions that are being overlooked or not properly taken into consideration. For example, you already know, or a lot of people understand, that Nigeria is in an energy crisis at the moment, because in spite of being one of the largest exporters of oil, it is facing issues of supply, issues of inability to refine its own oil, and then issues around the IOCs that it has not been able to meet certain contract deals that it had signed in the past. So when it comes to setting up or starting refining proper, it is only right that the right royalties, taxes, and issues, the details of these contracts are spelled clearly to all the parties concerned. So it is in order that this review is being done, because it helps the new government to situate all the issues properly so that they are in full control and they are able to give an account of whatever it is that is happening in that sector. So it's a welcome development in my own view.
Absolutely. It's all about accountability, not just to the government, also the leadership in power, or the administration in power, so to say. It's all about accountability to the people that these deals are being meant for. Now to you, Mr. OPEOLUWA, from a different perspective, do you think that this decision by the Senegalese government puts in question some of the deals that are being signed, not just in the West African nation, but in other countries across the African continent? Does this question the authenticity of some of these deals?
All right, so for the West African countries and regions, we must understand that talking about the various businesses and international deals in the oil and gas sector, it has to do with the intentionality and the sincerity of purpose. Those part of energy, we understand the energy is something that is very critical to the development of the West African nation. Because as of today, most of the West African nations are still under the developing countries, and they are still looking forward to meet up with the 21st century leadership style of the Western world. So what do we need for the leadership of West Africa? We must understand, like the Senegalese setting up a commission. It's as a result of various gaps in all of this conversation. Various gaps is setting up the international business. Because it's one thing to have the international business, it's another thing to have regional business. And you must understand that whether you have international business or regional business, the ethics of the business must be adequately followed. And when it is not followed, various governments will come and various governments will go. But the system will continue to remain in place.
Same.
So for leaders of Africa, you must understand that building a sustainable system is what is needed. It's not just signing a commission. Because if you sign a commission that is not sustainable, when I come in to power in the next 4 years, I may decide to remove that commission. So what happens to the people? What happens to the business? The business will become what? Will become as a status quo. And another government will come in again and begin to look for how to rejig and set up another commission. With all of this, we are already wasting we already have what we call high cost of governance. So sustainability, intentionality, and also integrity of purpose is very key for African leaders. And beyond that, we must create a sustainable and transgenerational system in order for the economy of West Africa to be sustainable.
Absolutely. It's all about sustainable development. Thank you immensely, Dr. OPEOLUWA, Mr. OPEOLUWA. Now back to you, Dr. FONGOD. You listen to your co-panelists. Now this decision, it comes just at the sidelines or on the silence of this recent pressure by the civil society in Senegal for the government to be able to order for the withdrawal of French troops. Now we've seen the withdrawal of these French troops in other West African countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and a host of others. But then, could we term this decision, in as much as it might be beneficial to the Senegalese people, could this be some sort of deviation from the actual matter on ground?
I don't think it's any kind of a deviation. As a matter of fact, you need to mirror image what is happening on the ground vis-a-vis countries like France. If you've looked at the history of France on the African continent, they have place people in power on concession on natural resources.
Absolutely.
You look at countries, I mean, just look at all the Francophone countries on the continent of Africa. So that's going on. And obviously, if there's any commission that is set up in places like Senegal to be able to have some kind of a concerted effort in trying to be able to figure out what these contract agreements have been over the years, it is absolutely recommendable. This is something that should have happened a long time ago. Unfortunately, it is just now that we are coming to it because obviously, the consciousness of the African is waking up. We are looking at something like resource management, where you have a particular country that has absolutely no idea in relationship to how much it's making. Her citizens are completely, out of the loop as to how much money is actually coming into the country and how much money is being siphoned out. Nobody knows this. So you live in a country, in most West African countries, most of our contracts, most of our country's revenue is top secrecy, but that is not the case in the Western world. If you look at in the Western world, everything that the country makes is, it's an open ledger. Everyone has the capacity to see and to know exactly what the country is making, where the country is making money, and where the country is losing money. That is the tenet of what we call democracy. Unfortunately, on the African continent, we don't have that. So there has to be a way in which we fully understand that, especially when it comes to the oil and gas sector, with its great impact on the economy, it has to be an open book. And we have to be able to make sure that that money is being used for social reforms, schools, hospitals, and everything in between, because that is the main source, that most government will use because of the oil and gas commodity in the world market to be able to enhance and build and develop, their own society and their secondary industries that should emerge, out of that. So we have to be able to understand and say, kudos to those guys in Senegal for setting up this commission, and out of this, birth a new era, it births a new environment, even for foreign investors to be able to say, if there's going to be some kind of accountability, if there's going to be stability in the market, then we need to be able to come into these areas, because we don't have to pay A to pay B so that we can have the contract signed by D. That is what Africa is known for. So once there is this transparency, foreign investors should be able to thrive. They should love this kind of an environment. And obviously, the underlying effect at the substratum of it all is that most countries will, especially Senegal for this matter, will be able to gain a lot of foreign investors in the oil and gas sector. Not the other way around.
I would like to stay with you, Dr. Fongod. You cited something which was in line with the next question I was asking. Given you're an economist, you mentioned that such decisions will not just flourish the country, but it's equally going to attract foreign investors. Now, what are some of the economic impacts that this country will tend to enjoy? Let's look at the benefits as a result of this recent decision by the new government.
Obviously, we'll be talking about issues of increased revenue. Once we've basically, gone in and we try to figure out what is going on, and we know exactly where the money is, if there was some kind of a discrepancy in terms of the way the contracts were set up, where we are losing money, folks will basically come in and they're getting a lion's share for their personal pocket. That revenue gets back into the government coffers. And what that means is the government has a lot of money to spend on public infrastructure, in healthcare, in education. So that is important. What that also means is that if we fully understand exactly how much money we are getting, then the government can begin to have, secondary ideas of being able to push the country into some kind of an economic diversification. Remember, oil is not an unlimited commodity. It is limited. It's limited in two ways. Number one, as the world changes in terms of its energy sources and its ideas so far as energy is concerning, oil becomes more attractive and less demanded. But as also we keep mining and tapping and pulling everything out of the ground, so it's the quantity that we have literally disappearing. What that means is we have to also look long term and ask ourselves, how can we diversify our economy? Where can we get money from oil and gas and invest in other infrastructures, in other sectors of the economy, so that we can absolutely be able to bring our economy up to speed. Not that sometime in the distant future the whole entire economy will just crash and burn because oil is no longer needed. Job creation is important, it's vital. Secondary industries that will come as a result of oil and gas, if we have enough money, it's also great. And the reality is this: once we begin to understand that we have done our due diligence in understanding how much money we have, and try as much as we can to be able to use that particular money in helping out the economy, our dependence on foreign currency or foreign debt will basically reduce. We don't have to be borrowing. We can't borrow our way into prosperity. All right, we cannot borrow our way into a first world status. We can't do that, or into a developed world status. We basically have to use what we have and all the resources we have, and oil and gas is a good place for us to start. I think job creation will be a huge part of all of this as we begin to diversify the economy, bringing different sectors into the economy that never existed, developing those sectors that have been left underdeveloped, in that way boosting up the economy and bringing a lot of young people into the job market.
Thank you, Dr. Fongod. Back to you, Shittu. Now, since we are headed towards, say, economic growth and development, and of course, fair deals as far as some of the sectors is concerned, in your opinion, what lesson can other African countries learn from, say, what's happening in Senegal, for instance? Because the African continent is at the point where some of the deals that come in sometimes are not favorable to these countries. So how can countries on the African continent ensure that whenever deals are coming in on the table or the discussion table, they are deals that are fair and benefit the African person?
Okay. There's a lot to learn from what is happening at the moment, but what I must say quickly is that in all of this, there is always the immediate concern. There is the short-term implication.
Absolutely,
there
yeah,
is the long-term implication. While we understand that these renegotiations can be useful and helpful to Senegal, one of the things that we must be very mindful of are the legal risks involved. Because if those who had signed a contract with a sovereign nation, to execute contracts in a certain way, if they feel unfairly targeted by this review, then it may stall, the development of the oil and gas sector in that country. It may lead to international arbitrations. And when you are in international arbitration, you may not be allowed to explore your own resources while, that arbitration is on. So in terms of overall implication and how other, African countries should look at things, I want to see that in spite of public expectation of, transparency, a boost for the Senegalese economy, a shift in foreign policies and relationships, we should be very mindful of, entering into negotiations without looking at the totality of the implications of, those, contracts. I'm almost optimistic that, considering their finance and audit background, as ex-auditors, it is almost certain that the president and the prime minister will be able to ensure that the contracts that will be signed in this regard will be thorough, and they will be able to ensure that it is for the immediate and the future interest of Senegal.
Thank you immensely, Shittu. Now, to wrap up this conversation on this first topic with you, Mr. OPEOLUWA, now, do you share the same opinion as your co-panelists?
All right, so for me, I believe, like my co-panelists have said earlier, the Senegalese as a leader has given another tall order to different African leaders. Tighten up your security when it comes to oil and gas. Let there be the regulation. Another thing we should look at arena of the regulation of the oil and gas sector. For Nigeria, there's been a lot of deregulation policy, but those policies are still on paper. It has not been properly activated within the African space. So what does that mean? We need to work beyond those policy papers. We need to activate our different intentionality. We need to activate their sincerity of purpose. We need to activate the revenue generation. Because when you're having oil and gas and there is no adequate revenue generation and you're having revenue gap within your country, that means you'll be having deficit budget. And if you're having deficit budget, the system will cry and even the citizen will cry. So our leaders must have a good mind for a good revenue generation and also sustainability in the economic space.
Mr. OPEOLUWA, TAIWO, journalist all the way from Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, without any transition, we shall be taking you to the next topic for today, which will focus, of course, on Nigeria, the West African nation, with regards to the country's ongoing fuel crisis. And of course, the question of this day on Nigeria is if bringing back the fuel subsidy could actually alleviate the nation from its current economic impasse. Of course, like our guests this day have been discussing a similar topic of what's happening in Senegal. We shall be focusing this time around now in Nigeria, where the former Nigerian president had attributed the removal of the fuel subsidy, which he blamed for inflation toppings of over 34.9% in June, highest rate in about 30 years. We recall that in August, following the protests, we saw President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that reacted to the end bad governance protests, saying, ruling out the possibility of reviving the petrol subsidy, which was one of the protesters' key demands. And the president insisted that the cancellation was rather painful but necessary situation for the West African nation. It's worth noting that fuel imports in the West African nation cost about $600 million monthly, but the removal of this subsidy has heightened the country's economic impasse over time and causing the situation which demands domestic refiners to fill in the gap. It's worth noting that the Dangote refinery, with about 650,000 barrels per day capacity, and the 4 NNPC refineries across the country which are under refurbishment, experts believe that they could be able to resolve the country's daily fuel consumption requirements. Amidst all this, we shall be discussing this with our guests once again. And now to debut this with you, Dr. FONGOD. Now, could you shed more light in a bit to comprehend from an economist point of view? What would you say has been the impact of the fuel crisis in Nigeria on the country's economy as well as the entire continent?
We're looking at this, series of events and series of circumstances in economic terms that would have absolutely pushed somebody like Tinubu, to bring about an end to the fuel subsidy. First of all, the issues of inflation. What that means is too many money pursuing too many goods, lesser goods rather. So too much money pursuing fewer goods, and then we have the issues of inflation. So in other words, in trying to be able to take that out and reduce inflation, you take a lot of money that's in circulation. And how do you do that? Raise prices at the pump, or basically take out for subsidy. So technically, you're actually raising prices at the pump because you now allow people to buy, to spend a lot of money purchasing, the same thing that would have purchased with fewer money, just previously. So that has been the issue with Nigeria. Unfortunately, I think that does not also solve, bringing back for subsidy does not solve the problem. It probably might solve the issues short term, but the underlying factor about, inflation is not being solved. So we might be able to release, immediate relief so far as prices are concerned, we might be able to address the issues of social, stability, because obviously young people are no longer going on the streets and demanding that something needs to happen because, they have the basic for to take care of what they're taking care of. Small to medium-sized enterprises might begin to enjoy the benefit of lower expenses and operating costs because obviously everything rises and falls on four, all right? So transportation is four, electricity generation is four, people going back and forward. If you're going to buy anything, you have to factor in the four aspect of that to the overall cost. So if you're looking at that from that perspective, there's going to be a short-term relief. But the problem is that it has to come with other issues, which means that just reducing the four, basically putting back for subsidy does not solve the problem that the government has been facing. We have to find a way to be able to address the whole entire country and bring it to a level of economic health, right, where we are able to solve the issues of inflation without basically putting an overdue burden, on the citizens. And even if we had to do that, that process had to have been so gradual, all right, so that you reduce inflation over time, and then in that way prepare the economy, not just by putting a heavy shock on the economy the way it was done in Nigeria. That process would have been done over time, basically begin to reduce the amount of forced subsidy. All right, just keep reducing the amount bit by bit. Sooner or later, the economy adapts. Everything gets pushed up, systematically, and then nobody gets to really feel the effect than waking up one morning and saying, hey, guess what? There's no more for subsidy. That was a big shock on the economy, and I think that the government needs to look at this a little bit more differently, even though they bring back for subsidy, but that still does not fix the underlying reason to why it is that the economy, and the issues of inflation got so bad.
Absolutely, and I believe that was in line with what the former President Olusegun Obasanjo stated, that it could have been a gradual process. And now, getting from you, Mr. OPEOLUWA, given someone on the ground, you get to experience the repercussions of this fuel crisis on a daily basis. What can you tell us is the real-time implications of this fuel crisis and, of course, the scrapping off of the fuel subsidy?
All right, so for me, sitting down in Lagos, Nigeria, so as at 3 days ago, I had to 3, 4, 5 kilometers just to get fuel. And instead of me buying at the rate of 600 naira per liter, I got it for 800, 900 naira per liter. And as of today, we are talking about some people buying it for 950, 1,000 naira per liter. So what does that mean? That means that there's pressure, more pressure on the inflation. So within 5 days, the inflation is moving from 35% to 40%. So that's another economic crisis. So within 5 days, we are having the NNPC not talking much on the reason for the crisis. Within 5 days, the petroleum marketers, they are making double money from the citizen. Within 5 days, the government is standstill. The government is not saying anything. Now, beyond all of this conversation, one thing we must understand, subsidy removal on the fuel should have been done more than 10 years ago. So what does that mean? It's long overdue. But as a government, like my other colleague doctor said, as a government, there's something we call stakeholder critical engagement in the 21st century. You cannot jump on economic decision within a space. There must be conversation and critical stakeholders engagement that will give you the analysis on how to remove the subsidy, number one. Number two, the cost implication on the citizen. Number three, the implication on your budgetary allocation annually. Number four, talking about how you are going to give palliative to the citizen within 6 months or within a year. Now, all of these dynamics were not put in place. And that is why we are having a crisis that led to the 10 days protests and riots from August 1st to August 10th. It's supposed to be 10 days, but apparently it was done adequately within 3 days. And on the third day and the fourth day, Mr. President spoke. But beyond all of this speaking from the presidency, the first thing you must understand that, like my colleague said, whether you bring back the subsidy or you remove the subsidy, it will not reduce the inflation. We must understand that clearly. Because the inflation has been on the high side even before the subsidy removal was done. And also, we must also understand that whether you remove subsidy or you don't remove subsidy, it does not remove fuel crisis. Fuel crisis depend on different characters. Number one, the marketers. Number two, the NNPC. Number three, the government. Number four, the citizen. So we have four characters that determine whether there will be fuel crisis or not. So whether there is fuel subsidy or not, it does not remove fuel crisis. Even the days of General Olusegun Obasanjo, when he was the former president of Nigeria, there was a lot of fuel crisis under his administration. So for me, it's like fuel crisis has become a normal norm in different administrations in Nigeria. And for us to solve that, there must be systemic approach to solve the PMS crisis in Nigeria. That systemic approach is not there yet. What we are only issuing every 4 years is administration approach. And that administration approach cannot solve the fuel crisis. That is why we're having all of this challenge. But we need to create a sustainable systemic approach. And what does it mean to have a sustainable systemic approach? We are saying that there should have been alternative energy, sustainable and affordable alternative energy, especially to the rural areas, plus palliative, economic palliative, or energy palliative to the urban areas, because the inflation rate in Nigeria is divided into two. The inflation rate in the rural area is different from the inflation rate in the urban area. For instance, if you are buying a commodity like garri in Lagos, the price is different from that same commodity of garri in Ogun State. So we can see that a lot of cities have challenges, but some of those challenges cannot be transformed or transferred to the villages. So that's why we call it what? Multi-dimensional poverty within the system. So when we have a sustainable systemic approach into all of this conversation, fuel crisis could be a thing of the past in the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. OPEOLUWA. Now to you, Shittu, you listened to your co-panelist, and he suggested that it was imperative for the government to do this step by step, while noting that economic palliatives could have actually helped the country recover better from this economic crisis. Now, with all this in mind, with this point here cited so far, do you think, do you believe that these palliatives will actually be effective, given the context of the current situation in Nigeria as of now, given it was a problem, the fuel crisis was something that has existed in previous governments?
Personally, I do not believe that palliatives will work. It's a form of impoverishment. A form of impoverishment of the people. What people need will be a system where the masses can earn a living, a sustainable form of living, and have access to energy, and have access to other human development indices that will make them become better citizens. However, on the issue of the fuel, subsidy removal, the major problem was in floating the naira at the same time, declaring the subsidy removed. One should have happened after the other, and then graduated, considering its impact on, the economy. Because at the moment, what we are having are complex issues, interfacing at the same time. For instance, we are going to be having, reduced remittances to the revenue of government. because just a few days ago, the president agreed that what the NNPC had gotten in the tune of about 3.8 or 9 billion, 3.8 trillion, sorry, will be used for payment of subsidy. Now, apart from that, it will have impact on, our fiscal health, our economic health. It will have impact on inflation. So we must look at issues from a more holistic perspective in such a way that both the masses, both the players in the sector will be able to, stay stable in such a way that all factors required for economic advancement of Nigeria is put into consideration. In essence, if we do not have our refineries working and we continue to rely on importation of finished products, we will continue to have all these issues snowballing, going out of hand beyond the plans and direction of the government.
Thank you so much, Shittu. Now, in a bit to proceed the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Talking Point of your Pan-African channel for you, Media Africa. We're discussing the fuel crisis as of now in Nigeria. And now to you, Dr. Fongod, you listen to your co-panelists with regards to the various points they had to offer pertaining to this topic of discussion. Now, there is this brief or general belief that local refining of crude oil could potentially eliminate the need for petrol subsidies altogether, or better still, make the market price affordable. Now, you're an economist, and we had Shittu that was talking about getting refineries in the country operational so it gets to benefit the people rather than importing. Now, from a different perspective, we've seen Dangote, the Dangote refinery, which of course is working on something with the Nigerian government to be able to sell crude oil. Now, with that in mind, what impact, or let's first of all start, will this local refinery of fuel products in the country eliminate entirely the fuel subsidy? And I'd like to add, what impact would these have on the cost of living crisis and, of course, the nation's economy? Looking at a country like Nigeria, that is like Africa's most populous nation. Dr. Fongod, are you with us?
Both of my co-panelists have hinted as to, what needs to be done and what the issues are. Unfortunately, it's not just one issue. It's a multifactorial thing. It's a buffet combination of a lot of issues that has driven the economy to where it is. Obviously, if we have more refineries within the country that is refining crude oil, and we don't have to depend on what's happening from the outside, that's great. Then we also have to do with the issues of the international prices of crude oil, which is the major way in which the government of Nigeria actually makes money. Once the prices of crude oil in the world falls or drops, then the government can only sell so little, so goes also the issues of inflation. I think that when we start looking at what has actually led to the depreciation of the naira, which is basically where we stand so far as inflation is concerned, we have to absolutely talk about the issues that the currency in itself, which is basically paired, which is always paired with the US dollar, has not done so well so far as exchange rates are concerned. That has absolutely clobbered the naira in the world market. And so when we are not refining petroleum products, if we are not converting what we have, into semi and finished goods, then and only exporting that out of the country, that makes the naira even weaker. And that is the problem that we are facing on that front. We need to be able to make sure that we are exporting finished products. So the Dangote refinery in Nigeria, it's not just a welcome news, it's absolutely brilliant. It is good. We have to be able to make sure that we do that. And then, the idea so far is that we have a lot of insecurity taking place in Nigeria, and that's the fact. The insecurity that is taking place in the northern part of Nigeria, it's another major issue. What we've done, in essence, is we are reducing food that is supposed to be coming from the agricultural belt that is in the northern part of Nigeria. That disruption also pushes prices up, and what that does is that you have a lot of people with a lot of money pursuing very limited goods, especially when it comes to food supply. And that also basically push up everything so far as prices are concerned, and obviously the issues of inflation. The middle class in Nigeria is rising thanks to technology, thanks to the fact that most of us are now basically interconnected within a global network, which is the internet. And now folks in Nigeria has the capacity to work anywhere in the world. So a lot of people are actually being moved from the bottom into the middle class. What that means is those who move from the bottom to the middle class has a lot of purchasing power. With that purchasing power, without goods or services, so goes inflation. So we have a lot, it's just too many issues that is, responsible, for the issues of inflation. And I think that one of the biggest issues we are facing right now will be the issues of, fuel cost. There is really almost nothing that we can do at this particular point rather than to be able to reinstitute for subsidy and then gradually ease ourselves out while addressing all other issues. And the reason for that is because if we don't, then we're going to push ourselves in a situation where this thing will not end. Most of the fuel that is being used in Nigeria is actually used as a result of the shortage of electricity. If we are not doing anything on the electrical front, if we are not making sure that there's constant power, constant electricity, then obviously you have to substitute that by fuel. And in the case where there is no fuel, those who are using this for business purposes, every single thing else will just go up. It's a cascading effect. It's an avalanche of everything you can think of. Nigeria is in trouble, and they absolutely need help. On the economic front, I have no idea where you start, because you have to basically start with about 6, 7 different or 8 different things at the same time. How be it you introduce this gradually, but you have to. Without that, you address one issue of fuel, with fuel, then you have to address another issue of insecurity. That still does not solve. I think one of my co-panelists said that earlier. Long before the subsidies on fuel got, yanked out, they still had the issues of inflation. So to address the issue of inflation, we have to look at all of these things at the same time and then start doing something about it. But to stop the bleeding now, we must be able to reinstate, fuel subsidies. It has to be done now. And then gradually over time, as we address all the other issues, we can now begin to systematically take it out of place. I think, in my opinion, that's how we deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that is in line, because as of now, we have $1 is actually the price per dollar of, say, Naira is actually rising as of now. But then let's look back at what you said. It's time for action. And that will lead me to the next question. To you, Shittu. I'll take back you, Shittu. Now, experts at PwC, which happens to be a group that focuses on what's happening in Nigeria, has suggested, which is in line with what you said earlier and your co-panelists, that the subsidy removal was long overdue, which was in sync with Mr. OPEOLUWA's discussion or his own contribution. But then these experts revealed that there were some benefits to the subsidy removal, which amongst which is cited as a short-term benefit, the fact that it has reduced government borrowing and the associated huge deficit in the short term, but they gave us long-term benefit that is going to make the Naira stronger and a decline in imported inflation in the long run. And now when we're looking at this, $1 as of now is about over 1,500 Naira, but then that is not our point of focus or the bone of contention. With all this, do you also believe that bringing back the subsidy is going to quell all these problems like these experts suggest? Is it actually going to make the Naira stronger and, of course, beef up the Nigerian economy? Shittu, if you're with us and you're speaking, please, can you unmute your mic?
It is true that, in the short term, there are benefits of returning the subsidy, because basically, for consumers, it's an immediate relief that, okay, they will not pay as much as they used to pay for fuel, for PMS particularly. However, that is temporary and artificial, because it is not sustainable that government will import fuel and allow Nigerians to pay less than what has been imported. It's a burden on government. What the government should drive at is to ensure that it keeps its words. It had said that refineries will come on stream. The Dangote refinery is expected to have come on stream by now. The Port Harcourt refinery is supposed to have come on stream by now, and probably the Warri refinery. That has not happened. NNPC continues to shift, I think for the 5th or for the 6th time, the date of commencement of production of refinery of refining in the refineries. Essentially, if these refineries come on stream, we should have between for Dangote and Port Harcourt refinery close to between 35,000 and 60,000 workers. When you have that much people in the employed, it reduces the burden on the average Nigerian, at least within their local economy, because every person working in the refinery will be able to support at least 2 individuals. And so somehow you begin to reduce, the poverty in your local economies. Again, one of the positive sides of, paying this subsidy is that there's some level of social stability. Nigerians are apprehensive, Nigerians are angry, Nigerians are tired, because we seem not to know when all of these pains and relative suffering will end for a nation, especially that claims to be giant of Africa and has oil and gas resources. So what is happening is that because of some of the faulty economic policies before now, we are caught in between doing the needful and doing what will be populist. If it's just to be populist, we would rather have fuel at reduced prices, pay off, the extra that is on it, but it will impact, our energy governance. However, when we are able to say, okay, this is a temporary relief, however, our refineries must work, the ones that are unable to come on stream, we should be able to require an investigation into what is going on there. In fact, left to me, the NNPC should be unbundled. We should get an independent investigator to tell us what exactly is happening with this company, because today it is blowing hot, tomorrow it is blowing cold. For instance, when Nigerians were angry at the fact that there is no clarity about what is happening in NNPC, and they had requested that the parliament investigate what is going on in the NNPC, NNPC declared that they were opening vacancies for people to be employed. Now, when you say that, a lot of Nigerians who are seeking favor from NNPC or the executives of NNPC will begin to cower around them. And some of the people who are supposed to investigate the officials of NNPC are some of those who will actually be requesting, for slots for their children, their cousins, and their relations. So beyond, the unstable economic policies that we must take, because you see, when you have people who are at least over 23 million Nigerians are facing hunger crisis. They are in critical food insufficiency, state of insufficiency. In that regard, it means that when you allow this state of insufficiency to continue, it can lead to a serious crisis that will be beyond belief. So we don't want to see ourselves in that scenario, because 22 million, 23 million people is not child's play. So we need to do things in ways that will alleviate the suffering of the masses and reassure the masses that these policies are meant for them, so that it doesn't turn out that policies that seemingly are good for the people, but because they have long-term gestation period, people begin to die off, or people begin to lose their jobs, or people begin to lose hope. I mean, look at the rate of suicide in the system. People do not just take their lives until they realize that they have lost all hopes and all sources of getting back on their feet. So yes, on one hand, these policies are good for the economy, but on the other hand, we must balance between reality and the outcomes of this policy. And again, we must ensure that those within the sector are transparent enough, because whatever policies we make, once there's no transparency in the system, we'll continue to go around the same circles. And that returns us to the fact that our refineries have been comatose for a long time, because we have a subsidy regime that people importing fuel, and we will do everything possible to ensure that they continue to import this fuel to the detriment, of the masses.
Of the masses, actually. Thank you so much, Mr. Shittu. Now to you, Mr. OPEOLUWA. You listened to your co-panelist who stated the benefits of the fuel removal, but then from a different perspective, he equally cited that the government will need to face reality rather than, and also focusing on the implications of such policies. Now, in your perspective, what are some of the negative impacts of these, or say the return of the fuel subsidy on the Nigerian government and, of course, say Nigerian economy? And, of course, how would it aggravate the ongoing fuel crisis?
All right. So,
yes, right on, Mr. OPEOLUWA. Mr. OPEOLUWA, Taiwo, are you with us? Okay, while we wait on you to say adjust the technical hitches which you're facing from your end, we should just reiterate that, ladies and gentlemen, you're watching us on For You Television. You're listening to us over the airways of FM 96.3 For You Radio Africa. Of course, we're streaming on our different social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube, For You Media Africa English. Meanwhile, you are also watching us or streaming us on our application. There you can download, of course, on Play Store and App Store. Ladies and gentlemen, meanwhile, we should reiterate that we're discussing this day the fuel crisis in Nigeria, the West African country, amidst several issues, where we are citing or asking the question, could the bringing back of the fuel subsidy to the West African nation actually quell the fuel crisis which the country is coping with? And of course, if this is going to have implications on the economic crisis of the West African nation. Meanwhile, if we have Mr. OPEOLUWA back with us, please, I was asking what could be the negative implications of this fuel subsidy on the Nigerian economy? Mr. OPEOLUWA, are you with us? Okay, meanwhile, we lost him. Hopefully, he's going to join back the conversation. And I'll take that question to you, Dr. FONGOD. You listen to your co-panelists and, of course, the point of view they had to share. Now, do you think, what are the negative implications this fuel subsidy would have on the Nigerian economy?
Obviously, we're looking at a place like Nigeria where we have to be able to invest a lot in other sectors of the economy. You know, we need to invest in healthcare, we need to invest in education, we need to invest in structural development, we need to be able to build roads, you know, talk about the issues of electrification, which is one of the reasons why the fuel pricing is basically so dire in Nigeria. Putting a strain, you know, on the public finances, you know, just for subsidy will really not help the country in the long run. So we have to be able to understand that. The economy is growing. That's one of the issues we are facing. The population is growing. A lot of people are actually being born in Nigeria. The population is growing. Those who are entering the job market is also growing. Those who are basically finding ways to become self-employed and having, you know, a way of making money is growing. So a lot of people are moving from the bottom, you know, going up. And that in itself, if we disrupt this by basically putting in, you know, some kind of a cost, you know, bring in subsidy, we will never be able to truly understand in economic terms what is the true cost of every commodity in the country is. And that will also affect our economic policy. The framework that we want to send on economic terms will absolutely be based on faulty information, because the truth of the matter is it's only now that we are able to guess to basically see what's going on and engage in a true free market environment what the true cost of every commodity is. So based upon that, it's important for us not to be able to interfere with the market. It's important for the market to do what the market does. I'm a big fan, of a free market. I think that the free market is extremely quite important. Once we start meddling in the market by providing subsidies, by just basically giving people handout, that does not truly gauge to us the full scope of what the market is and the health of the market. So, and it's important for us to know the health of the market because that also influences policy. If we know exactly what the true state of the market is, then it's going to affect a lot of things. I believe that fuel subsidy has been one of the biggest problems with the electrification systems that we have in Nigeria. Once the folks selling generators basically boost up the economy in that sector, so you have a lot of generator repair people that have entered into the market and they are repairing generators every day. That's one market. You have a lot of people who are importing generators into Nigeria. That's another market. What that means in essence is that we really do not understand the severity of the lack of electricity in the nation. Now that one component in that very, diabolic equation is concerned, which is basically fuel prices, now everybody's like, wait a minute, what is going on? But the reality is we never understood just how dire the issues of electrification in Nigeria was until fuel prices basically, fuel subsidies basically got taken out and the prices literally got yanked up. So we have to be able to allow the market to be able to breathe, let the market tell us the true state of affairs, and that way we can address the issues, squarely. If we had not put in for subsidies, I guarantee you a lot of money would have been invested in the electrification sector. A lot of communities and states will have basically said, what, forget that if the federal government will not do anything, we have to do anything in our own state. But now that everybody has generator, a lot of people are not really thinking about the fact that they should be able to have uninterrupted electricity like we have in the West without, always hearing the buzzing, ringing, annoying sounds of a million generators, just because we need to lead the night, we need to lead our nights and basically having any kind of refrigeration power, and AC. We have to be able to understand that we need to allow the market. Once we interfere with the market, we destroy every other thing else. It's a cascading effect. Once we interfere with the market, we basically begin to push the market in trying to create, somewhat of an equality, which really doesn't hold sway. And we have to make sure that the market speaks for itself and tell us exactly the true health, so that whatever we are trying to do so far as boost up the economy is concerned, we're doing so with real numbers, real facts, not artificial numbers and not artificial facts.
Absolutely. Now it's all about facing reality. Now back to you, Shittu. You listened to your co-panelists. You share the same opinion as he did.
Basically, there are lots of implications for the action of government, and in the days ahead, we have to be battling with a lot. In the sense that, one, we will be facing increased debt. The government is trying to move, the country away from debt, but the fact that it will now need to defray the cost of fuel, PMS, means that there will be increased debt, on the part of government. Again, we should also be mindful that there are likelihoods of potential, fuel shortages, because what NNPC would ordinarily expend money on has changed. It will now begin to expend money on other issues because of the fuel shortages. Another issue is the forex. Forex volatility will happen because of the pressure on naira, the fact that what should ordinarily have been saved is being expended. Nigeria will also, the government will be strained instead of having enough to channel into other areas of governance or areas of development, like physical projects or developmental projects. The government will be constrained to limit some of its policies. So some of the policies of government, bright as it may be, will be impacted by this policy of reversal or, payment of, subsidy. Again, the government may lose political capital. That yesterday it said subsidy was gone, today again, it has subsidy back. So the government must find a way to strike a balance between the expectation of the masses and the reality that it has to contend with. Don't forget that, the country can survive without borrowing. However, the country must also empower the people, the populace, such that they are able to create wealth, generate wealth, and have sustainable living. That way, government will not spend as much as it's been spending. It will take off a lot of pressure from government, and expect that there will be some stability of the naira when productivity picks up, in the country. One of the driving forces for inflation in the country is food inflation. Because of the insecurity in parts of the north, most states that would ordinarily have been farming communities are unable to farm, and therefore the products are very little, and therefore they are expensive. And once the cost of food goes up, it will affect the cost of other items in the system. So government must try to strike a balance. One of the fundamental, economic policies, political policies, or decisions of the government is to ensure that local government has autonomy, and in that regard, it means that monies that would ordinarily go to states for disbursement to local government will now go directly to local government, and that means that governance is closer to the people at the grassroots, and hopefully that will help, take off some pressure from the states, take off some pressure the federal government, and people begin to look inwards for governance when there is transparency, at the local level.
Okay, to stay with you, Shittu, from a contextualized point of view, faced with this conundrum in the West African nation of Nigeria, what do you think is the way out of this economic impasse that is plaguing the West African country?
The economic impasse is basically because we have criminals in the system, and the criminals must be fished out and penalized. Those who are profiteering from Nigeria's power issues are mostly people who are importing generators. People who are importing generators understand that they will make a lot of money if we do not have power supply, and therefore they will impact the power supply distribution system in such ways that Nigerians will be frustrated and be left with no option than to procure generators. It's the same thing with the refined products. Those who are profiteering from imports will do everything possible to ensure that Nigeria remains an import-dependent country. So the government must penalize people who are hoarding PMS. They must ensure there's transparency in the system. They must unbundle NNPC. They must ensure that there is record, publicly displayed for people to have access, to the dealings of NNPC, and to understand the system, the sector, the challenges in the sector. Because when you continue to keep records secret, we will continue to return to the same issue again. Just a few weeks ago, the NNPC did say that about 63 illegal refineries were destroyed. How do you destroy illegal refineries without apprehension and prosecution of people who were managing these refineries? That is not the first time. They continue to attack and destroy the illegal refineries. The problem is the backers and the protectors of these illegal refineries are in government, and that is why we're unable to fish them out and prosecute them. If we continue to dance around the issue, we will not have a headway. But if we prosecute and penalize economic saboteurs, we will have some sense of sanity in the system, and then the absence of illegal refineries will make legal refineries to work. You cannot have dozens of illegal refineries operating in the system and expect the legal refineries to work, because these are the ones who are stealing, plundering our resources, taking it out, for refining outside, and returning it back for Nigerians to buy at, cutthroat prices.
Absolutely. Now, to wrap up this edition of the program, ladies and gentlemen, I'll direct this last question to you, Dr. FONGOD. Now, you listen to your co-panelists in your opinion from a global perspective. Now, what is the way forward if Nigeria is able to deal with its full crisis, deal with the economic impasse that is plaguing the country? What implication would that have at the global level?
Well, I'm thinking, obviously, a healthy Nigeria is extremely very important for the world, especially on the African continent. To those of us on the African continent, a healthy Nigeria is extremely very important in terms of economic terms and even politically. Once Nigeria is stable, the whole entire region is stable. Nigeria is considered to be the elder brother on the continent of Africa, and I think it's time for her to pull herself by her own bootstrap and be able to lead the continent. We have had a lot of talk about Nigeria, and unfortunately, the country of Nigeria has been a big failure, on the global scene, especially on the African continent. What's taking place in places like Rwanda, not Rwanda, the DRC, what's taking place in the DRC should not be happening if Nigeria was absolutely up to par. What's happening in places like the Sahel, if Nigeria was up to par and basically understanding what her role would have been, we would have had absolutely no issues in the Sahel. But the failure of Nigeria has been the failure of the African continent as a whole. And so obviously, if she wants to be the big brother on the continent of Africa, it's important for us to hold her to that particular status, to state that, Nigeria's failure is Africa's failure. That being said, we need to be able to make sure that we increase the amount of refineries and refining capacity that we have in Nigeria, especially at this domestic level. We must make sure to curb out the issues that she is going through. The refineries must go operational. People like Dangote, they should not be starving on the background. It's quite shameful, that is what we are getting so far as Nigeria is concerned, that we are basically destroying those with the capacity who have the vision for Africa, the vision for Nigeria, to be able to help elevate the levels of poverty. We must be able to address that. For subsidies, a broad mass spectrum where you take a single brush and you paint everything else so far as the country is concerned does not help. We have to make sure that for subsidies are kind of targeted, because the issues with for subsidy is this: the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer because everybody benefits, but that does not help those at the bottom. So if you really want to help those at the bottom, maybe if we send them direct cash transfer and be able to say, what, if you're making such an amount of money and you're not really making any money, we're going to give you this amount of money to be able to spend in the economy. Those are the people that we need to help. And even if we have to give for subsidies, let us give for subsidies to targeted industries that will be able to affect Nigerians directly, maybe the transportation industry, maybe the agricultural industry. So if you help this particular industry, you will realize that prices will drop, that prices of things that are so high will drop, because they will have no reason to be able to factor in fuel prices, before selling to you what they're selling. So that are some of the areas in which we can be able, to target this particular issue. In the end, if you look at Senegal, if you look at Nigeria, if you look at other parts of the continent, you realize that we are basically living and dying with crude oil. We need to diversify. We have to be able to build up other sectors of the economy that will bring us to a place where we become more competitive in the 21st century. And if that was going to be the case, then I believe that we should be saying that we are seeing a light at the end of this very long, dark tunnel. And let it be that Nigeria leads the way. Let it be that she becomes the other brother on the continent of Africa and not the puppet of the West.
Absolutely. Nigeria have to live up to expectations. Before we wrap up this edition, we got indications that Mr. OPEOLUWA is back with us just in a few minutes, or just like 2 minutes. Mr. OPEOLUWA, please, what are your expectations, in just adding to what Dr. FONGOD said as far as Nigeria's full crisis is concerned? Mr. OPEOLUWA, if you are speaking, please kindly unmute your mic. Unfortunately, we were unable to get you. Unfortunately, it's on that note that we shall be closing up today's edition of the program Talking Point over your Pan-African channel. Meanwhile, we acknowledge the presence of SHITTU who joined us all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. We acknowledge the presence of Mr. OPEOLUWA, who took our time to be part of us this day on this edition of the program. I equally say thank you to you, Dr. FONGOD, for taking out time out of your busy schedule to join us on today's edition of Talking Point. Meanwhile, I'll say it's at this juncture that we draw down the curtains of today's edition of Talking Point over For You Media Africa. Thank you for your keen attention, televiewers, listeners, and audience of For You Media Africa. Hopefully, we shall be seeing you next time, but do stay in company of numerous programs on your Pan-African channel. Bye-bye.